Welcome back to the TimCo Retail Manager course. This course focuses on real-world application development. Basically, this is practice for what you'll be doing in a real job. Now, in this lesson, we're going to update our code to handle offline use both when logged in and when logged out of our Blazor WebAssembly portal. Okay, so we'll update the progressive web application settings as well to make it more customized and make sure it's an installable web application that looks good for us and that it actually works. So for those of you who are subscribers to the Patreon at the $5 per month level or higher, head over to get the source code for today's video. That'll give you a good copy to compare your code to in case you run into an issue. Let's jump right into Visual Studio and get started with writing code. So let's go over to our portal, which is right here. And in our portal right now, I have added one thing off screen. And I did it just to save us some time here. In the www root, I've added this app logo.png. Right now we have this icon-512.png, which is the default Blazor logo. But we want to get rid of that and actually use our own, which is this new logo that I created. Now I created that using Metro Studio, which is free. You can go to Syncfusion and get Metro Studio 5. You have to sign up for it, but they'll give you a free license for it. Once you download it, I went to characters, just typed in 3 letters, TRM for TimCo Retail Manager, and chose the Source Sans Pro. This is not exactly the high-end logo that you'd probably want to have in a real application, but this works for us and it shows you how to create a logo. Once I filled that in, instead of using something else like a pre-built logo, I can come here and say edit, and then I chose the background shape, the padding, the width, which I customized to 512 pixels. I chose the kind of the empty circle, and I chose both the background color and icon color to be the same. So that's our logo now, is the TRM logo. Okay, so I exported that, not saved it. I exported it and exported it as a PNG file, put it in the correct folder, and now we're all set to have this be used almost. And the last thing is we have to change our manifest.json, where it says right down here, icons, the source, instead of icon-512, we're going to say app logo.png. And that is a PNG, and it is 512 by 512. So we won't change the theme color or background color. We haven't really modified those. We do want to change this name though to be TimCo Retail Manager. And we can say TR Manager for the, or just TimCo. TimCo RM, let's call it that, for the short name. So that will name our application. Let's pull up a web page here. When we go see our website here, we can install it. Actually, I've got to switch out. Right now I'm in guest mode, which I do that just to make sure there's no like extra bookmarks or other stuff. But I can't install an application in guest mode. So let's close it out and open a new profile. And there we go. So now with this, right now it says install portal app, and there's the icon, which is all the old stuff. We don't want that. We want the new stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is publish these changes to our site, which we've made that a little easier. We right click and say publish. And we have the publish profile, which you should have created in the last lesson. We hit publish on this, let it build, and it will publish out to the site. And once it does, then we'll be able to reload our site and make sure we destroy the cache of it too. So if we just hit reload, this isn't going to do it because of the fact we have to have the new version, which comes through killing the cache. So open DevTools, we go over here to network, and we'll say disable cache, hit refresh, and that should do it. And it didn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit F12 here, actually pop these out. And in the Service Worker tab under Application, check this box that says update on reload. What this will do is it will basically bypass the normal service worker application and say, hey, when you hit reload, go ahead and reactivate the service worker and re-download it. So with that, we should be able to hit refresh here. It should reload everything. And now we should see, there we go. Install TimCo Retail Manager app. TRM is the logo. So we're all set now with our application. Let's close out that. So now this seems to work correctly, right? So let's try going to products and authentication. Cool. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's install this. Actually, let's wait to install it. Let's do this. Let's go to F12 again, bring these back up, and we're going to uncheck the box now. Now you've refreshed it. Let's go over to our network, and we're going to say that I want you under this drop down right here where it says no throttling, change this to offline. So now this website is operating offline. If we hit refresh, still works. We can still go everywhere, okay? So even though we're offline, meaning it has no access to our web server, we're still fully operational. Well, almost. Because if we go over here and say tim at imtimcorey.com, and we say log in, that gives us an unhandled exception. If we look at the code right over here, it says fetch token failed. And if you go to console, it says, hey, I've got, let's zoom in a little bit here. It says I've got an unhandled exception here when trying to fetch this right here, the localhost 5001/token. That failed. And it's saying I can't do this because we're offline. Now, also the API is offline, so even if we were online, the API would still be offline. It wouldn't work. But that right there gives us an indication that, okay, we need to do some work to make this offline capable. Now, we cannot have them log in offline. That's just not going to work, okay? So we have to make sure that, let's go back to network and change this to no throttling, and then we can close this out. We can come back over here and run the API. So the API will be online as well. And then come back over here and say log in. And this time it should be that it grabs that credentials. We can now see our products and verify authentication. Cool. So it's working when we're online for logging in, which is going to be how it has to be. You cannot log in when you're offline. However, you should be able to stay logged in when you're offline. So let's go back over here to F12. We're going to go back over to here and say work offline. All right. So let's go back to verify authentication. That still works. Products mostly works, but we're missing a couple of the JPEGs. These JPEGs aren't showing up, but the rest of the stuff is. Notice over here it says, hey, failed to fetch these JPEGs, and notice that it's fetching first from the service worker and then trying the WebAssembly, looking for those two JPEGs. Saying, hey, can't find those, so we can't get to this URL because we're offline. So it mostly works there, but now let's do this. Let's hit refresh. And remember, we're offline. Notice I'm logged out now. That's not ideal. We don't want to be logged out because then we can't ever work offline. When we were logged in, we were online and went offline. So we need to fix that as well to keep us logged in even when we go offline. So let's close. Let's actually just, we'll just minimize this. We'll close this and minimize again. And we'll hit stop here. Okay, so we got the API stopped, and we're gonna look at our code to figure out, hey, what's going on and why can't we just work offline if we've been logged in? So let's go over and look at our auth state provider. All right. So auth state provider right here, and down in here is notify user authentication. So we get the logged in user token information right here. But if this fails, then we're going to hit this exception, catch, and we're going to say, hey, log out, and they're no longer authenticated. Which isn't ideal because of the fact that we're still logged in. It's just we're offline, so it can't contact to get the token information. So let's do this. For now, what we're going to do is move this one line out of here into a temporary try catch. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically, actually, you know what, we'll catch this. We'll catch it, but we're just going to log this to the console. That's it. Okay. And we're going to move this line up here. Okay. And then we're going to say, okay, the rest of this stuff, we're going to leave alone because we should already have a token. We can parse the token. We can do all the rest. We're just getting this additional information that really, I think we can say, you know what, don't get that information if you're offline. So this will essentially eat the error because we're going to try it. We're going to catch down here, grab the exception, but then we're going to do nothing with it and allow the rest of this code to execute. Okay, so let's try this and see if we can't get this to properly operate, which does mean we have to open our publish back up. And this does get a little tedious because of the fact that we have to publish, we have to make sure we update the site, and then we have to make sure that we're in that latest version, then we can test this offline capability. So to do that, let's bring this back up. What we're going to do is we're going to hit F12 again. We're going to go over to our application, say update on reload. We're going to come back to network. We're going to bring it back online. We're going to hit refresh. So that clears everything out, starts over on our application. We're now going to run the API. So that's running in the background. We're going to come back over and bring up our other application as well as our developer tools. And now we should be able to talk to, let's uncheck the box here. We should be able to talk to the, whoops, not this box, application, update and reload. We should be able to talk to our API. So let's do that. And see if we can log in. We can. We can go to products, verify auth, and so on. If we come back over here and say work offline, we can still pull this up, but the images aren't there. We'll address that in a minute. And verify auth, that all works. Now let's hit refresh. We're still logged in. We can still view the batteries and the finish by John Acuff. We can still verify our authentication. If we go to console, we will see that there was probably an error in here somewhere. If it wrote it doesn't always write it, where it failed to fetch is probably the correct error. Let's clear this console. Let's clear it again, actually, and hit refresh. Okay, so it did, yes, it failed to fetch because we're offline. So this right here, this error for API/user, that's the error we're going to get because of the fact that we didn't have access to the server. We're offline. But that's okay. We can still allow that because, yes, we're offline. We know that. That's a known error. So with that, we can do all these actions still. let's now come back over. Let's actually go back to here. We'll hit stop. Let's address the images that are offline. So in www root, we have our service worker, and inside there we have service worker publish.js. Let's open that up. Notice that offline assets include, and there's a list here, including PNG files and JPEG files. It should be caching those files, but it seems like it's not because of the fact that they are a remote file. Now, the first thing to do, which probably will not work, but I want to do it anyway to show off the fact that you can do this way, is we're going to create another one, because notice, let's bring up the console window real quick. And in here, these are JPG files, not JPEG files. I believe the question mark here says the E is optional, but just to verify that, we're going to create a specific rule for JPG files. Just to be safe, but I don't believe that's the issue, because of the fact that these aren't files that are local to the project. They are remote files on another server. So let's do this. Let's now go through the complicated process of, first of all, publishing our application. Make sure that gets published. Then we will reload our application. Then we'll also rerun the API to make sure we have an online version first. So let's run the API. In the meantime, let's bring up this, and we can get rid of the API, or minimize the API. Don't get rid of it. Go back to network, go back online, then come over to application. Don't you love working with service workers? It makes it a little more complicated, doesn't it? That's okay, but it does mean, let's uncheck this box, come over here at network, and take it offline. It just means that it's a little more work, and you don't want to do a ton of regular testing this way. You just want to test the things that are offline specific or PWA specific. So now we can go back to home. This still works. Go back to products. It's still not working, which is what we expected. So we expected this to happen. It's still not fetching a JPG file because of the fact they're on this remote URL. Now, there are a few ways to handle this, but they're all seemingly complicated. So let's talk through the options at least. I think for us, we're going to leave it like this because it's offline. And it is saying what they are, it's just not showing us the pretty picture. But let's talk through what our other options are if we did want to display these images. One option would be to install these images locally. Now, that's not really a great option, and let's look at why. Because if we go over to our solution and look at our portal, notice that, yeah, we have a www root folder. We could even put an img folder in here and download images to it. Except for the fact that Blazor WebAssembly works totally on the client side. So this is on the server side right now that's getting served out. So if the Blazor WebAssembly application tried to store the images, it would not be storing them in that www root folder. And that gets a little complicated anyway, because now you're trying to save it and trying to keep that cache updated and so on. Another option would be to use a JavaScript bit of code for all of these images. So when we go to serve the image and it says, hey, I'm not available, it can have a fallback. And that's a little bit of JavaScript code. We can just have a placeholder that says, hey, this is a placeholder image while we're offline. Now, we could also try to do some other things with detection and testing that get a little more complicated. Things like testing these images as we go to load them right in our C# code, and then doing something as an alternative if that image does not come back correctly. That would involve a double load of the image potentially, and it's not going to be perfect. The the desire here is, well, let's just show that we're offline. And if we're offline, then we could do something different. We could, have that information everywhere. So if we're offline, change out the images. The problem is that detecting if you're online or offline is practically impossible. And the reason why is because it's not a yes or no state. That offline versus online changes based upon, well, if it's just a quick glitch, maybe you catch it at the wrong time and you say it's offline, but it's not really offline. It's just a temporary internet connectivity issue. Or maybe it was so slow that you said, hey, it's offline, but it's not. So there is not a great detection. There is the idea that, well, there's a setting in here that says if it's offline or online in Windows or in the browser, but that's a deprecated, it's a not really useful setting. I'm not sure if it's fully deprecated yet or not, but it's not something that's used or that gives great information. So there's a lot of different options around offline, but essentially we don't know when we're offline or how long we're offline for. So the key here is probably the best option would be to come in here to our service worker and to modify this to add external URLs. I have not found a good example of how to do that, but that would probably be our best option to include remote URLs and basically remote URLs with wildcards. So you'd say, okay, our path right now, if we pull up here and say F12, our path for this is localhost 5001/images/star, anything.jpg, because then we can get these two images and then we add more images, they would get added as well. So that's probably the best option, but I have not found any good examples of how to modify this to add a remote URL. So that's the way I'd probably pursue if I were doing this for production. I'd probably be reaching out at this point to Microsoft or somebody else to try and help me figure out how to cache these offline files. We're not going to go there for this because this is a demo application, but this does work. And notice that with our alt text, it does tell us what they are. So I think we'll leave that as it is. So in a sense, we're not doing anything to modify this for offline use. We're letting it be as it is. But this does work offline. Again, this is, I believe, right now. Yes, we're offline right now. So we're still able to browse everywhere we need to be, even though we're offline. We are able to see that new icon as well. So let's do this. Let's take ourselves back online. So there we go. There's our images. And now let's install this application. That's something else we haven't done yet. Install a TimCo Retail Manager app. Let's go ahead and do that. It's going to close that out. We can minimize that. And we get this right here. And we'll say, yes, pin to the taskbar, pin to the start. I won't create a desktop shortcut. That's fine. I'll leave it like so. And allow. Okay. And now we have our full offline capable web application that starts from the taskbar. So right now I have an icon on the taskbar that is my logo. I'll make sure that's pinned. Yep, it's pinned. So I can close this out. I can click on the logo and we'll open back up and say, hey, welcome back. You're still logged in. If we hit F12, there's still a network because it's still a browser. Okay, a progressive web application that's installed looks like a real application, but it really is just a headless browser, a browser with none of the stuff up top. So you can hit F12, you can still say, hey, work offline, and we can still get access to everything we need to, except those images, and then we can go back online, and we get those images. Okay, so our application now works offline. It installs, it has a logo. We can do all the cool stuff we do in a real application, but now offline capable so that we could work remotely. Let's say you download to an iPad, you're working, but then you get into a place where you have no connectivity to the internet, you can still do your work, cache the information, and then we come back online, you can have that uploaded. So there's lots of cool stuff you can do with this, but right now our application is fully working online and offline as a progressive web application installed on the desktop. Now, if you go to your apps and features, you'll notice that if we look down here, I believe it's under T for TimCo. Yep, TimCo Retail Manager right there. That's installed. So I can uninstall this as well if I want to get rid of it. So with that, that's our progressive web application working offline. Perfect? No, we'd need to do some work on that to make it perfect. Those images I'd want to do something with, and I'd probably reach out to Microsoft to deal with the caching of a remote URL. And I'll probably do that personally and see if I can't get an answer for us. But for right now we'll be okay with the fact that those images don't cache locally as well when working offline. All right. So with that, thanks for watching. If you have questions or comments, leave them down in the comments below. I appreciate it. And as always, I am Tim Corey.